So, Tom, how can you say there's no viruses? How do you explain that people get rabies when bitten by a dog? Again, there's a big difference. There's two separate questions here. The question is, do people get a specific disease called rabies when bitten by dogs? And then there's a whole separate question of, is this separate disease, if there is one, caused by a virus? Nobody is claiming in particular, although I'm going to question this in a minute, that you don't get sick, that people don't get sick, that they don't have a disease which we call measles a little bit erroneously, or chickenpox, or rabies, or whatever. That is not the argument, that there's no sickness. The argument is the sickness is not specific, and the sickness is not caused by a virus, because you can't find a virus, and nobody has ever shown using a proper scientific study that the virus causes disease. But here, I'm even going to go take it a step back, and this was information I haven't particularly investigated myself, but I got it from, I think the first was from Mike Wallach, who was the director and I believe producer of The Viral Delusion, who looked into human rabies. And I think the second bit is from Brandon Murphy. I could be wrong, but I hope I'm getting that right. And who did a really deep dive into the history of rabies to seeing what he could find. So I'm just going to read these facts because I think it'll be interesting. So first, from Michael, according to the CDC, from 1980 to 1996, there were 32 human patients with rabies, and of these, only 7 had exposure of any sort to an animal in the previous 6 months. That's 22%. 25% had no animal exposure that they remember at all. So what happened to these 78%? So only 22% even had any sort of contact, which doesn't mean that the contact caused the illness, but even didn't have a contact. Then, according to the CDC, from 1996 until, I guess, the present, there were 37 human cases of rabies, 30 acquired in the US. 28 had no animal exposure at all. So how do they get rabies? If we go back into history, there was an investigation in the early 1900s by the Philadelphia Dog Pound, where they process 6,000 vagrant dogs annually. The workers get thousands of bites, and they looked at this for 25 years, so over 150,000 dogs. This was before routine rabies, so-called vaccination. 0 cases of rabies. 1900s in London, the London General Hospital, they have records of 2,668 people bitten by dogs and admitted to their emergency room. This was without any sort of treatment, 0 cases of rabies, 0 deaths, 0 treatment. Also in the early 1900s, St. George's Hospital in London admitted to their ER greater than 4,000 dog bites, 0 cases of rabies, 0 deaths. The Pasteur Institute, however, has reported 3,000 cases of death by rabies, all of which had received treatment with the vaccine. The final thing is the pathognomonic hallmark, or the pathology hallmark of rabies is supposedly these little inclusions called Negri bodies in the nervous system. And the controlled studies show that these Negri bodies happen in many other conditions besides rabies, so in fact are not specific at all. So I would say that not only is there very little, there's no evidence that there is a virus or that there's any specific disease called rabies caused by a specific virus. There doesn't seem to be any evidence that any so-called specific disease is actually caused by the bite of an animal, particularly a dog, which then brings into question, why are people lining up to get their animals rabies shots? Now, to get into a little bit of speculation here, again, this is always tricky, but what might be the problem with the animals? So one suggestion I heard is that when an animal unfortunately drinks toxic water, and specifically water that has arsenic, mercury, insecticides in it, they get a significant throat irritation and a throat closing, which drives them a bit crazy, and then they stop eating and they start starving. Their throat closes, they salivate, and then they get into the malnutrition. They start biting people, and the bite causes lots of fear and potent enzymes in people, which apparently at least sometimes can make them sick. And that may be something to investigate as to what is really happening with this disease we call rabies.